Hey Brian, thanks for joining us again. We just listened to your update here. Big news today, the statewide shelter-in-place order got issued by the governor. It goes into effect at 6 p.m. tonight. Tell us what the city thinks about that order and how does it affect Peachtree Corners?
Well, I mean, Governor Kemp's our governor, so we think that whatever he thinks, is wise, we'll give it the thumbs up, and we'll be, willing participants in, what we can do to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus, and that's
Right.
what's driving this. But the devil's always in the details. And so we are looking at 6 p.m. a transition from a locally issued executive order to a statewide one.
Right.
And the governor, of course, his order applies to a lot of areas of the state that don't have the same landscape that we do here. They don't have the same population numbers or density or that kind of thing. And so it's a sweeping one. So anytime you do it over a wider, audience, there's going to be places where it's maybe too strict and other places that it's not, restrictive enough.
Right.
But the transition we're going to have is going to be interesting because the order still has some aspects of it that has caused some confusion amongst municipalities within the state.
Right. You touched upon that in your statement.
I did, and so there's really three categories that were created by the governor's orders, or the executive order. One is businesses that are prohibited. And that's pretty similar to what we had. It's your typical things like, movie theaters. They're businesses in which you would either have large gatherings of people,
Right.
or you would not be able to maintain the social distancing
Like a
guidelines,
bar.
of 6 feet, like, a nail salon or a
Right.
barber shop, or, things like that where you have to get closer than 6 feet to provide the service.
Correct. Yeah.
So not too dissimilar to ours. And then there is a critical and essential business list that exists. The governor's executive order references a critical or an essential critical workforce, it's essential critical infrastructure workforce. And it's a list from the Department of Homeland Security that lists all of the professions and types of activities that they consider essential. Mm-hmm. And again, a lot of the same things that we would all assume. And of course, medical community and construction and financial institutions and, governmental services, things that we hold essential. You need your water to turn on in the morning. You need your electricity to turn on. You need traffic laws to be enforced and, all
Right.
that kind of stuff. So those two things are not too dissimilar to our current one. A lot of the confusion comes from the last one, and that is the category of everyone else. Versus the governor's executive order versus ours did not have an essential and non-essential list. Mm-hmm. Where ours was, you either made one of the two lists. If you were not essential, then you were non-essential and you needed to cease operation.
Right.
The governor's last list is not non-essential. It's basically this list of companies that have a criteria that they can use, a litmus test that they can use to decide whether or not they can remain open. And that is one under this this category called minimum basic operation. So the non-critical infrastructure businesses can operate under the governor's executive order if they meet the definition of this minimum basic operation, and that is the following. The minimum necessary activities to maintain the value of a business, establishment, corporation, nonprofit, or organization, provide services, manage inventory, ensure security, process payroll and employee benefits, or for related functions. Such minimum necessary activities include remaining open to the public subject to the restrictions of this order. So here's where we don't understand. If you are a company, as we are interpreting this, and you say that your activities provide services or they're necessary to maintain value of an organization, you can stay open. I mean, so, a shoe store provides services. We have to have shoes.
Right.
At least nowadays we think we need to. I guess technically you could go. But somebody could say, well, I'm providing a service, so I need to stay open.
Or one of the questions I had from a small retailer was, Walmart's staying open. Of course, they have groceries, they have hardware, but they also have shoes and clothing. So I own a small shop that sells shoes and clothing. Why are they able to stay open and sell shoes and clothing and I'm not?
And it is, and there is no order that can be written that does not have at least some of that gray area.
There's going to be winners and losers.
There are. But with this one, it's almost like as long as you can maintain 6 feet of separation and groupings of no more than 10, you could almost argue that you're either providing value to the greater organization,
right,
or you're providing a service, and so you should stay open. I mean, I don't know of any organization that exists that doesn't provide a service, or at least can argue that they do. I don't know if maybe making money is not a service, potentially. So I don't know if a hedge fund, maybe is. But anyway, at the end of the day, we're in unusual times, and extraordinary times oftentimes require extraordinary measures done in an extraordinarily short period of time.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing that there has been a determination that the spread of the virus is we're at a critical juncture in Georgia. The governor has made a decision that we need to statewide go to this. And in the interest of getting something out quick, oftentimes there's those last little details that kind of need to be hammered out. Sometimes it requires people looking at it from different vantage points before you're aware, like, oh yeah, that's not as clear as it could be.
Right.
So that's being worked on right now. 6 p.m. tonight is when this goes into effect, so we have many hours between now and then that could be some clarity.
Yeah, some clarity, some granularity maybe that'll go into this, or maybe I heard you mention during your update earlier when we were live was that possibly like that could be kind of the baseline or the minimum baseline, and then communities could decide to maybe tighten that a little bit if need be, depending on density and just the way the city is. Because like you're saying, somebody out an hour and a half from here, that's just basically got a few thousand people in a town might not need the same level of restriction above and beyond this that you might.
Correct. And so the Georgia Municipal Association, which represents the interests of cities in the state, has essentially, on behalf of cities, asked the governor to do just that. It's very similar to like the way the military command structure works, meaning at the top of the chain, there could be some sort of a, mandate issued, or guideline or whatever. And as you move down the chain, you can add to it and make it more restrictive, but you can never make it less restrictive. Yeah. And so here we're just saying, look, Governor Kemp, we understand your floor. You don't want anybody in the state to be, below a certain floor, but give some flexibility to local governments out there that may need to do some things beyond what you did because of our uniqueness. Maybe it's our density. Maybe it's a type of activity we have. Maybe it's that we're a hot spot. I mean, Albany, Georgia just randomly is a hot spot.
Yeah.
And so maybe they need to be doing things that normally they wouldn't have to because they're not necessarily in an urban environment like Metro Atlanta is. So, those are the type of things that I know that the office of the governor are considering right now. May or may not happen, but that is the request. And there's a request for some other clarity too. So again, as we get closer to 6, we'll know a little bit more and, go from there.
Let me ask you a personal question. I know that, you have a distinguished military career, and one of the things you did was you were, I think loosely called the mayor of Sadr City after the invasion in Iraq. What did you learn from that experience? Because that had to be a tremendously difficult experience with the logistics, with the restrictions, with the threat, the physical threat, obviously, but still a lethal threat, just like this represents. What are you drawing upon from your military career that's helping you make the decisions you're making today?
Well, first and foremost, we're kind of doing a little bit of it right now, which is you have to communicate. People in a informational vacuum, their mind wanders. They don't know what's going on. They start to assume the worst, or they assume nothing's being done, and so you have to communicate. Sometimes the communication is merely, we don't know yet, or we're working on it, but we just know that we are working on it. And so, communication is key, so that's part of why we're doing this. Another one is when it is time to issue something definitive, like something that results in action, is to be definitive and clear, to be as simple as you can, to be as clear as you can, and then to follow through. Because every time you do that, if you do it haphazardly, if it's kind of, squishy and vague and nebulous, then when the next time you issue something, people are kind of like, oh, here we go with some sort of an edict that's going to come out, and they're not going to really know what's going on or know how to enforce it. So don't go public with something until you're ready to go public, until you have a clear, there's clear guidelines, a clear objective. Why are you doing it? And then you've got to be prepared to enforce it. There's nothing worse than coming up with rules, but then there's no way to enforce it, so everyone's like, whatever. My kids try that all the time, where you give them some rules, and then they're going to test mommy and daddy to see, they said I have to make my bed every morning, but they usually don't check, so I'm just going to stop making my bed because there's no penalty or no reward for doing it. Either way, if it's just ignored, then they're going to ignore it too. And so those are some of the things that you learn, when you have to do it. When
you're your kids do it, they have to bounce a quarter off their bed like you do in the Army? Or
no, I don't do that anymore. I've gotten soft after I
You're not as hard as you used to be?
No, I'm not.
So, hey, speaking of your kids, you got two lovely children, right? What are you telling them about this now? What would you recommend to parents who have young elementary, middle school, high school age kids? What would you tell them to say to their kids?
Well, I'm not going to recommend to any parent what to do with their kids, because I barely can handle mine, if at all. So I'll just tell you what we're doing.
Okay.
Whether somebody wants to take that. And I'm also in a unique position because my wife's a PA. So I have a medical professional in the house, so that we can kind of talk to them about what this means. But what it essentially we're saying is, look, there is currently, a sickness that is going around. And mind you, my kids are 11 and 12, so They're not all that old. So just keep that in mind as I tell you how I'm talking to my kids. People will be like, I certainly hope they're not teenagers, because they're talking down to them. But, we're like, look, there's a sickness going around, and it's a new one that the medical community hasn't really understood how to either stop it or how to cure it, so to speak. And we're having to take unusual, actions to prevent more people from getting sick. And so we all have a part, and it's a little bit frustrating, especially my son, who really likes to play with, his friends, with organized sports and everything. It's been, really tough.
Right.
He had his entire baseball season canceled because of this, and he was looking forward to it. He was going to be, the oldest in that bracket, that league, and he was going to be, one of the, it was going to be his time to really
shine.
Yeah, shine, and he didn't. And so you just have to kind of say, look, we're all learning this together. We have our little part to play. And so, we do it now at home. What we've tried to do is do things that we normally didn't have time to do. And I'm seeing a lot of this out in the community, or hearing about it. Right. Things that you do as a family that you didn't normally do before. One of my bosses, council member here, Alex Wright, has come up with a really cool series of things that his family does together, like game night and other things that they do that they didn't have time to do before. And kind of like, fun things that whoever wins at certain games, that they get certain, advantages or whatever. And so those are the things that, when you look back, I think we're going to find that, well, maybe there were some good things that came out of it.
Right.
We had always tried to make a point to eat as a family, but with my job having lots of evening things that didn't always happen, we've eaten as a family more than we have in a long time. We've been able to go out and walk and other things that normally we would have come up with some reason not to.
Right.
My wife's certainly taken advantage of the honey-do list, and it has grown, exponentially since I've not had evening meetings and a little bit more time.
I mean, you live here. You're here at 4:30 every morning and leave at 7, or you're.
Yeah, I mean, so it's been a little bit interesting, and so but I'm seeing a lot of that with other families too. I mean, on nice days, drive around the city here, and the amount of people out exercising, walking with family, riding bikes is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And, people out in the driveway. I mean, we've seen some families have their garage door open and the inside of their garage is just full of, especially with young kids, they've almost made this like, wild room type of thing where they've got all these things and, parents throwing balls with their kids that you never have seen them do before. I mean, so, again, maybe society will change after this.
Yeah.
We will never be the same after this. We don't know how. Much like we weren't the same after 9/11. We won't be the same after this.
Yeah.
But maybe some of it is good in that maybe there's a reconnection with family that we didn't have before this, and we'll be better off for it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And also, I listened to an interview last night with Mark Cuban, famous entrepreneur, Shark Tank and all that, Dallas Mavs owner. And he was talking about America 2.0. This is really going to be a change. And the positives, he's saying there's 5, 7, a dozen companies that are going to be spawned out of this crisis. That when we look back 5, 10 years from now, we're going to go, wow, the next Amazon, the next Netflix, because things are changing. And that's one of the things you're doing here, both with the Innovation Hub and Curiosity Lab. I mean, right now, those companies, people like that, the next Netflix, the next Amazon, those people are coming here and looking at Peachtree Corners as a place to innovate.
Well, we hope so. I mean, again, we have the environment to do it. We're not the innovators, but hopefully we've created a laboratory for the innovators to come and actually innovate. But you're right. There's going to be stuff that comes out of this that we're learning that we need. And it's always cool to see, as we transition through different times in our history about how technology, how things, evolve.
Right.
So we'll have that here. I just hope that, again, we get through this and we don't have a degree of separation between humans that, we can't get back to. I mean, we were just talking the other day with one of my staff members about what happens if after this it becomes kind of socially, unacceptable to shake hands anymore.
Yeah.
Even after we get past this and there's a, vaccine or whatever for, COVID-19, but people are like, oh, when's the next coronavirus type of thing, so all of a sudden you don't have that anymore. And, we were already going to a point where it was easy for you to not interact face to face with people.
Right.
And losing that, human contact is, I hope we come up with a way that we can get past it and everything. But, again, we're still in the middle of it. And,
speaking of human contact, one of the things it looks like the CDC, the Surgeon General, even the White House is sort of backtracking a little bit on face mask. And I heard one commentator last night talking about, you just need to be honest with the American people. We can take it. We understand that the first responders, the front line, the medical industry, they needed these masks. But don't lie to us and tell us that, it's bad to wear a mask or you're somehow going to be more vulnerable. And now they're kind of acknowledging that, and maybe the people that are a little bit more vulnerable when they do go out to the grocery store, something like that. What's your thoughts on the mask?
Well, I've heard a couple things. One is, start with the shortage. I mean, so there is. So we don't have a stockpile to where everyone could wear it if they wanted to.
That's because 3M sent them all overseas.
Right. I mean, it is interesting. And even now, I mean, if you were making masks
right,
and you were an American company, that does not mean that other foreign countries are bidding to buy those masks because they have the same need. It's not like, the U.S. is the only country that's fighting this.
Yeah.
I mean, Italy is still, Spain is you know.
Well, I'm sure you saw that last night, which precipitated the hammer to drop today on 3M, because last night Florida already bought the mask a month ago, but foreign governments were coming in with cash
Yep.
and paying X number of times more per mask.
Yeah.
And
I mean, yeah, I mean, so it's, but
it's crazy.
So there's a shortage. And then two, I do know that what has been talked about, discussed, and again, I am not a medical professional or clinician, but I have heard that there has been a lot of internal debate on whether to go with it or not. And those who think that we should, they are usually clear to say that it's less about you catching it, it's more about spreading it.
It's more about spreading it and maybe just keeping you to not touch your face.
Well, I was going to say, that's the second part is the mask and the breathing part is more about preventing you from getting it if I have it.
Right.
But then the mask is serving a preventative measure, because when you have something over your face, you're less inclined to touch like we normally would.
Right.
And so because of those two measures, there is talk about maybe going to that. But then it also might be a different type of mask than the N95
Right.
that we're talking about. Now, cloth masks, which may not be as the same as acquiring it, but it's still serving the same purpose of maybe if you cough or sneeze, it's keeping it from, from being projected as far as if you didn't have it. And again, it's something to prevent you from touching your face that you normally would. So, I mean, if that's the way we go, then I will support, that being the predominant. There's a lot of smart people in our country and our state and our county and city who are looking at this from the clinical side.
But Peachtree Corners right now hasn't issued any kind of edict or anything.
No. I mean, and we're not, the city government is in no position to be saying, oh, you have to.
Leave that to the health experts.
Correct. I mean, public health profession exists for a reason.
Right.
And we're going to, we're going to be willing participants in whatever guidelines that they come up with.
What else would you want to tell the people of Peachtree Corners?
I mean, really no different than what I hear and what I try to, remind myself every day, which is, we're in this together. We don't necessarily know the end, but we've definitely had worse, this country has been through worse times than this. And, together, as long as we do the right thing, we'll get through it. And, we'll get back to a semblance of normality, whatever that ultimately becomes. But we'll get there. So just be patient and, be patient with us. We're just merely trying to be a good conduit for communication and helping to do our part to prevent the spread. But, we're residents, humans, just like everybody else here in Peachtree Corners. So we're not perfect, but we are, we are trying. So just stay tuned and we'll take the next step when it's time.
One last thing. I know we're starting to get inquiries because we just kind of put the word out there about the photography contest. And you and I have been talking, of course, with Judy Putnam, your director of communications, and we're going to postpone that, right, as far as any awards or any, I mean, people would still take photographs if they want, if they're out exercising or they're in their yard, but as far as the actual awards, we're not going to award those in June to give people more time and everything. We're going to extend it or
That's correct.
Postpone it.
So, for those who don't know, is, we ultimately, in the past you came up with a great idea, which was the best content creators out there are the people who live, work, play here.
Right.
So let's help train them to be better at doing that, and then at some point cut them loose.
Right.
And you've been, for the last couple of years, teaching classes on everything from still photography to videography to whatever, training this army of content creators, and this contest was our way of kind of activating them.
Right.
And so we were going to have a contest, or had really essentially started one, to say, create content, submit it, and there's going to be prizes or whatever. And the purpose was for Peachtree Corners to get its imagery and things about what it's like to be doing things within the city,
Right.
To the world, to show the world. And there's a lot of cool stories out there that we would never know if it wasn't those content creators. But with all of this happening, and of course us wanting to keep people staying at home,
Right.
we don't want to do anything.
Yeah,
that
we don't
would
want to
get-
encourage people to
so
go out there.
if anybody's done it, or there's something interesting now, maybe in their house or backyard or whatever that they want, take it and save it.
Right,
You
exactly.
can still submit it, but no, we're not going to do it now because, I mean, look, if the Olympics can be postponed, if I think we can postpone ours. If Wimbledon was just canceled and
Tour de France is on the
yeah,
bubble.
it is on the bubble. I mean, if they can do that, then I think that we can push ours a little bit.
All right,
too,
fair
so.
enough, fair enough. I want to say too, we appreciate the fact of letting us do the seminars and everything, and it really makes us happy. There's actually 4 folks in those seminars that are professional now, that started as hobbyists, and they're now making money, making extra money. Some of them are working full-time as photographers. The one young kid at the high school who's making a couple $1,000s a month now as a photographer and videographer doing real estate work, and all just because we had those seminars to help just inform the community of what's possible. And it's just really been a treat, and it's just fun to work with all of them, and some of them are helping us with
Yeah.
our social media now. So
Turned around and become an asset for your efforts, right?
it's amazing, yeah. Well, Brian, thank you for taking this time.
Sure.
I know it's busy. I know you got a lot to figure out with the new executive order, and be working with the other cities around the state to get all the clarity that we need for this. So thank you.
We'll keep
so
working
much.
on it. You're welcome.
Yes, sir. And we'll do this again Monday, I guess, right? We're going to have another
Yep,
update
we
Monday.
will do this Monday.
All right, sir. Thank you so much.
Yep.